modules, is the ultimate solution and goal for a lot of people complete, may not be joint accounts, but complete transparency.
Yeah, and listen, it may not be complete transparency, right? As long as you're, I'm going to say something and I'll explain it. As long as you're transparent about the non-transparency, right? So it's okay we, if I make 5,000 and Max, you make 10,000, and we have decided we're going to split our shared expenses in a certain way, and so we're putting our money in there. But the rest of us left over, you've got your 6,000 left over, and I've got my 2,000 left over. It's ours to do as we please, right? And I don't necessarily get to say, hey, I want to see what you've been spending that on, or what's been going on. Why are you spending on that, right? But we've talked about it and we've agreed to it, right? So it is transparency, just transparent about any areas where it's going to intentionally be opaque, right? Just be honest about that level of communication, setting the expectations around it. And if something proves to, you're like, actually, that's not enough communication for me, or that's too much, okay, revisit it. No problem, right? Just adjust.
That's key. Are you good on time?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. We can edit this out, but so we're a credit app. We're essentially keeping track of both couples' data in real time, or sorry, not data, debt. And debt is, for a lot of people, the scariest part of their finances. How should couples talk about debt? And I know it's obviously part of the same personality equation, but I would assume, is it not the most uncomfortable part?
It certainly can be, Max. I want to focus on your specific question. I'll say that sometimes it actually is the opposite of what you'd expect, that people can be uncomfortable about sharing when they have a lot of assets, right? For some people, they're like really proud, they're gonna like beat their chest about it. But for other people, maybe they feel like guilty, or they know they have some economic privilege, whether or not tied to racial privilege or gender or whatever, and maybe they feel uncomfortable with it or embarrassed. I have clients who've gotten inheritances and they get all weird because they feel uncomfortable, guilty.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Taboo.
Yeah, they don't know what to make of it. They don't know what to do with it, right? And so they end up doing strange things that are not like part of an overall plan, right? They're not leveraging it as well as they could in either direction. And so yeah, even on the like plus side in terms of assets, right? Even for people in the black, as they say, there's still sometimes discomfort, including, and maybe especially if your partner's in the red, right? Mm-hmm. If your partner's got a lot of student loan debt, you might feel uncomfortable telling them what you've got. And this is the funny part, because if I'm doing however financially, and I've been surviving, making it work, and my partner's doing better than I am, well, presumably that improves my life, right? Now we've got a mutual support system, right? We've got each other's back, we've kind of spread out the risk. Like, this is a good thing, but only if you're able to be at peace with all the emotions around it. And so, this is actually where that introspection, that self inquiry is really valuable. Even before you talk about this with your partner, first of all, you could start by talking about debt, but all else equal, I probably recommend, again, starting with some of those conversations about your experiences with the money, your points of view around it, and building up that safety and trust and comfort before you talk about your debt, because it's such a uncomfortable topic for many of us, right? So a little bit of self-awareness work can really help you in that regard, stay a little more grounded. And if you notice you have a lot of emotions around your debt, tell your partner before you tell them, like, I'm so nervous to tell you about this. Like, I don't know. I've never done this before. I don't know what you're going to think. And it's scary because I love you. I want this relationship to be amazing. And like, This just makes me so nervous. I'm like shaking, right?
Right.
Like you can tell them that. That takes some courage, but tell them that if my partner came to me to talk about something and was telling me that, I'd probably be feeling a little bit anxious about like, what are they going to tell me? But the moment they tell me and I realize it's not a death sentence, then I'm immediately going to want to take care of them and comfort them emotionally, right? And like be understanding and supportive, right? And like many other things, the anticipation of the conversation is often worse than the conversation itself.
Oh,
Because if this is somebody you want to be with, want to intertwine your life with, want to get married to, this stuff is going to be relevant, right? You can't not deal with it. You have to deal.
yeah, you have to. So
Now you're one step closer to figuring out, well, what is the tension? Where's it coming from? And how can we address it? And that in and of itself is a huge victory just the same.
totally. It's all about getting it out there, opening up, and then having an action item or to-do list. Otherwise, it'll never get fixed or solved, or you want to continue hiding it.
And yeah, and listen, sometimes you're not going to have a complete solution right off the bat to these things, right? I mean, there's not anything you can really do where it's completely free of any of those emotions. The question is, can you be open and vulnerable about it? Can you communicate and listen about it? And can the two of you really function as a unit in terms of having each other's back, both tactically, like in terms of the dollars, but then also on the emotional side, right? And their anxiety, let's say you're the person with the student loan debt or whatever, and you tell your partner and they feel anxious, just remember their anxiety is not about you per se, it's about the debt.
Right.
Now, if you accrued the debt in ways that were not very thoughtful or reckless, or maybe reckless, and you've shown no sense of awareness about that and or no willingness to work on those habits, okay, now they may very well be concerned about you. And now it is about you and not just the debt. But if they're anxious, it's because they're anxious about the debt, right? And hopefully that's something that the two of you can find a place of peace around and continue to move forward.
Yeah, that's great advice. What you're doing is God's work, helping people keep their relationships and marriages,
Thank you.
and live happier lives. Right, that's the goal.
Oh, yeah, indeed.
Far before getting out of debt, if that's even a plan or whatever, but just so they can be happier together, hopefully.
Listen, I have couples who are crazy for each other and have negative net worths, and I have couples who are, at each other and they have really positive net worth.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously by the end of my program, they're in a much better place, but I've seen people all across the spectrum in terms of income levels or educational levels or what kinds of debt. You can be in any situation, like you can feel any way about any situation. It's unique to you and your partner.
Fascinating. That's so many different ways to run a family, or relationship. So you just went over a lot of great stuff.
Thanks.
On the digital front, what are there certain online tools that you recommend to couples at any point in the journey?
Yeah, I mean, early on, I like to have my clients really go through and do it manually as far as looking at their expenses in particular, but also their debts and assets and all that. But once they've gotten to that healthy place and they get what's going on, I mean, there's a number of great apps out there, but I really like Zeta and Honeydew. Honeydew's HONEYDUE and Zeta ZETA.
Great.
First of all, I'm sorry?
I love their products.
Yeah, and what's great about them is that they are built for couples, to help couples navigate their financial lives together and the CEOs of both companies are really great people who come from a place of like seeing that this was hard in their own lives and then wanting to help other people get better at it. And then Zeta is now branching out, and they have joint accounts, like a joint bank account feature, and so much else going on. And so a lot of people don't know about those. I think they're great, especially if you and your partner are in a situation where, let's say, you're living together and splitting expenses, but not a joint account. You might be sending money back and forth to each other like 48 times a week, which can be really annoying. And there's a utility called Splitwise
Yep.
that really helps with that. That just basically keeps track of how much in total is owed to you or you owe to a person, right? So instead of having to transfer money every single transaction, it just keeps tabs over the course of a month. And it takes a little bit of manual input, but it's worth the effort in my experience, especially with roommates. But in this case, if you're not sharing finances with your partner, then it's also a good use case for that. So I really like those. And other than that, I mean, I think the same kinds of tools are great. Some of them are great for couples and individuals, but then now we see companies like Float who are, I mean, they're maybe creating for some of us something we didn't even know that, right? But once we see it, we're like, oh snap, okay, that's really great to have. And your credit score, because it's not actual dollars, right? You owe your debt in dollars. You make your income in dollars. You spend your money in dollars. Credit is this number, right? That if you don't understand it, it can be devoid of context. But it matters a lot.
Oh yeah.
In a lot of ways. And I think maybe the most powerful, this is off to the side of the couples, but someone once explained it to me that they like to think of your credit score as collateral. Like it's essentially an asset you have. And when you go to get a loan or a credit card or whatever, you are pledging that collateral. And what you're saying to the bank, let's say, is if I don't do a good job paying back this debt, you can take away some of my points.
Yeah.
Right? Now, those points that they take away from you don't have any value to them, but in that sense, and that's really been a profound shift in my thinking about credit scores. And it also illuminates the fact that if you don't do the kinds of things like opening up credit accounts that help you build a credit score, you won't have that piece of collateral. And when it comes time to buy a car, buy a home, or whatever, you're going to have one less thing in your corner helping you to get a better interest rate or to get approved for that loan, et cetera. So it's great to see companies popping up focusing on couples, and welcome to the family, Flo. Glad you're here. Glad we connected and found out about each other, and hope we'll continue to have a fruitful relationship ongoing.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time. This has been an awesome conversation. I mean, we've covered a lot.
For sure.
And it's, again, this is for couples out there. For the most part, it's not easy. Life is tough much of the time when it comes to money. So I'm really grateful that you're out there and in the fight. So